Hey everybody, thanks for joining me for another one-man review. Today I'll be taking a look at a few different projects that were sent over to me. Thank you so much. Sent to me from Matthew Mackman, who's 3T Publishing or Told to Tell. These are a series of small projects that will be coming out from Told to Tell soon, so I have some details on how much they all cost and where to get them. This is a reprint. This is Told to Tell Heroes in Crisis, Told to Tell number 5. This is a reprint of the book, and this is a book that Sean and I had a collaborative piece in the back. So here you can see the piece by Sean and I where we had taken some AI jumble and used it to compose some pages. I did my thing, Sean did his thing. We were completely no communication about how these things were going to set on the page together. We just randomly put them together, and it worked out really great. You know, his face showed up exactly where it should. This guy, so it was a really fun project. It gave me a chance to do just like a little experimental thing and try some new technical processes, some new printing processes. So this is kind of like having an artist that gets to go do a piece for a soundtrack and play. And then you've got a couple other really great artists in here that I was really happy to share the book with, including Banu Pratap. There's a piece in here by Everett Glenn, who I'm a big fan of. So we have an Everett Glenn piece in here. Who else is in this? There's Henri Dumas, who I really enjoyed. Jared Cody Wolf. So there's a bunch of people that Sean and I were really big fans of ahead of time and pleased to share cover with. So this is really cool. We've promoted it on the channel before, so I don't want to talk about it too much. But if you want to get a second printing, it is $20, and it ships with a copy of this here, which is not something that Matthew made, but he has a bunch of copies of it and he's wanting to get it into people's hands, and I'll talk about it in a minute. But this is called Infinite Cuck, and so if you ship with that, it's $26, and you can hit Matthew up on Instagram. I'll put the link for that. And then we'll take a look at some of his other projects here as well. He's has a zine subscription. He will ship one zine a month for 6 months, and that would be $30 inside the U.S. and $36 outside of the U.S. And Matthew sent along a couple of like the zines so you could see the types of things that he's putting out in that subscription. Matthew's just really interested in experimenting with the Foreman comics. He's really interested in collaborating with a bunch of artists, you know, just finding artists he likes and collaborating, and has a real good sense of like how to bring people together to kind of curate an experience. So these zines should be pretty interesting. This first one looks like it's taking the Bart Kira idea and is turning that then to Lone Wolf and Cub. So you have a bunch of artists collaborating here to take Lone Wolf and Cub into, or take the Simpsons into the story of Lone Wolf and Cub. So like Bart Kira, and you have a bunch of different artists here: Jeru Janofsky, Wilson Smith, Cameron Zavala, and Nathan Uten, and Mike Helms. And so that could be something like Bart Kira that's an ongoing project, which would be pretty fun and pretty wild. I might have to participate in that once I free up some time from Bound. Then we have a small selection of sketches here by Jonathan Kochiuba. I was particularly excited to see this one because I've drawn that exact same face of Reagan from The Exorcist for a parody comic I did a long time ago. It was a Grant Morrison Batman parody comic. Maybe one day we'll put that out. But just fun to see someone else drawing an image that you're so familiar with because you've done it. So this is a motion stillness sketchbook selection. So these are the kind of zines that 3T is going to be putting out. Then there is a project here called I Do Not Love by there is so much I want to say by Michael Scott the Younger the Third. It comes with a very cool little viewfinder that Matthew has sent over before that's like a little magnifying glass, and a little like promotional piece for Michael Scott Younger III, as well as a list here of 13 items that you can find in a book. So this isn't a comic book so much as a series of illustrations, and they're very dense. Like there's a bunch of, they don't necessarily look as dense as they are. Like here, oh, it's a leg, but oh, it's also got a little witch lady in it, and a tree, and some smoke coming up. So there's a lot of like hidden imagery in these big images constructed out of smaller hidden images. Really kind of fun thing to just spend a long time looking at. And then they've gone ahead and turned it into a game as well, which I think is really smart. You know, it's like a way to force the viewers to slow down. A lot of the content here is more adult. There's nudity and cut off legs and stuff like that. But I really like this idea of having a search and find book in this more wild style, underground style. So that's a really cool project you can get a hold of. I don't see a price on his notes for that one, but again, you can reach out to him through Instagram. And then probably the most interesting thing that Matthew sent over is the Infinite Cuck, which is a piece by Joshua W. Cotter, who I've just reviewed his first 2 volumes of Nodaway. Nodaway being a real heck of a project in terms that it's going to be 7 volumes long, supposedly. And I mean, each one of the volumes is huge. So Joshua W. Cotter, and like densely rendered with a lot of panels. He's a beast of an artist already. And then this whole newspaper is like a separate little cartooning project, and it's not like a simple cartoon in every image. There's some pretty densely rendered buildings and stuff going on in this. So I have no idea where Joshua W. Cotter is finding the time to do all of this, plus like all of this fictional writing up here that comes from the world of the Infinite Cuck. This is obviously intended to be a satirical piece, like the newspaper is from like a world in the future where the alt-right has Trumpers have taken over and are running the world, and it's full of language like cuck and beta soy boy and all that terminology. Really intended to be a gross exaggeration of all of that, I think. But then and it's talking about the fentanyl crisis and all of that. Inside, really quickly, you start to see Joshua Cotter, and I'm sorry I can't show the whole thing. This is just kind of big to all fit on one screen, but Joshua Cotter is going about his life. He's kind of the main character in this, and he's running into a bunch of these like redneck people, I guess, and like they're not presented in the most empathetic way. It's definitely like characters of the worst of the worst. I get the sense reading this at first that this is someone who doesn't have experience with like rural people. As the story goes on, though, you learn that Cotter does live in a very small rural area in Missouri, and he talks a little bit less characterized about his neighbors in certain parts, where he's talking about seeing them go from people he thought were normal people to being like these extremely militarized people carrying guns around in public and stuff. So it seems like Cotter's actually even more out in rural South than I've had the experience of, and is seeing like the deepest, craziest part of the far right. So that's fair. But then again, like throughout the thing, there isn't much empathy. There's an attempt to understand how these people he got pushed to that, but the answers that he comes to are kind of the ones that are around in the public narrative. I know he's seen these things firsthand too, but it just feels like there's not any kind of attempt to understand it is written off as the things that we're supposed to write these things off now, and not taking, some of the more legitimate concerns that someone who's on the conservative side might have about the country. It's just all like chalked up to racism, which I think there's a fair amount of, but I think there's other things going on, and these cardboard cutout views aren't so helpful. So overall, I found this to be, not the most empathetic piece, but it's still interesting, especially when it's combined with Nod Away. Also throughout the story, there's a number of times where Joshua Cotter goes into the idea of like anthropomorphizing and why you would anthropomorphize a character, and also like fighting back against the urge to anthropomorphize animals and stuff like that. It's a theme that comes up over and over again, which is kind of interesting. And me and Tori, that just came at a good time because me and Tori have been we've been watching a lot of animal documentaries lately. And of course, when you're watching those, you go, oh, look, like you tend to anthropomorphize. And the more we watch them, though, the more I'm convinced that we're really not committing any great rational sin when we see that in an animal, that our instincts about their behaviors, as when you see little children playing and the big one goes, and falls over and goes, oh, you got me, to let the little one have a turn. They're not processing that in the same linguistic way we are, but it's the same thing going on inside the animal's head. We've been talking a lot about actually going the other way with it, that the healthy thing would be not to anthropomorphize and see them as like, oh, look, they're more human than we thought, but to actually faunamorphize and start to see ourselves and our behavior as like, oh, like that's animal, like that's just our animal part in there talking. So it's just funny to see as things that we talk about and kind of mull over in our lives tend to also be showing up in material that I read. It's always kind of fun. Cotter in this sequence is making kind of his argument for what he thinks the world should be like, the United States should be like. He says, our freedom of and from religion is one of our country's best attributes. We get to believe whatever we want. It's amazing. We could even take one of the world's oldest religions and remold it to our every whim, rendering it completely unrecognizable in its new, bizarre, hateful, misogynistic form. We are free to believe absolute nonsense, but we don't get to what we don't get to do is try and force those beliefs down the throats of our fellow citizens and start demolishing the pillars of civilization when we don't get our. And he goes into this, and then you get some like really cool just compositional things going on the page as well. It's not always like in this more gridded look here, so he's playful with some of the compositional forms throughout. But again, there's this thing in this and a lot of content like this where he is like basically expressing what I think we all agree the United States is supposed to be, is like, hey, you're allowed to believe what you want, everyone's out of everyone's business. But a lot of people that are taking that view on either side, as far as I'm seeing it, and the extremes, doesn't seem able to apply that to the other side. Like, these people are allowed to be religious shitheads, and like the left needs to listen to this and be like, hey, people are allowed to like disagree with you about gender issues and things like that. It's not just a freedom for religious, but a freedom for thought in general. And so I always get bummed when I see material like this that is trying to understand a situation or trying to talk about a situation, but it's obviously doing it very much from one of the two poles, and it's not seen where it's failing to extend the hand of what they say that their worldview is that they're aiming for, not willing to extend that to people that they disagree with. No matter, like sometimes there is something you have to say, no, this is completely inappropriate, we won't accept this. But there's a lot of middle ground that I think is getting written over as well. So really interesting piece. I would definitely recommend getting a hold of it. It does have some of the more futuristic stuff as well, where it's thinking about how these things are playing out in technology. We have like these kind of robots and things here. So it does kind of set up some of the thematics of what Cotter is concerned with in Nod Away. It has some of the kind of visual tricks that you might get in Nod Away. So it feels like a surreal autobiographical. I mean, it's very like flow of mind through these topics. Probably like a diary thing he's doing as warm-ups while working on the real book. I'm not sure, but it's coming from the same headspace as Nod Away, It's just more like preachy, but I do think it is a cool companion piece. So this isn't something that Matthew has published, but he's a really big fan of Joshua Cotter and a big fan of this piece here and wants to get it out into people's hands. So he's sending it out with his own books. So when you're ordering from Matthew, you can try and order one of these because this is pretty limited as well. I will put a link to Matthew's Instagram down in the information at the bottom. And if you want to get any or all of these projects, like, definitely reach out to Matthew. Awesome guy, putting out a lot of really interesting stuff.
Whole new world. 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 For you and me.